July 30th, 2016, police in Mukilteo, Washington receive multiple 911 calls reporting gunfire at a house party.
We got a call that there were shots fired. Me and the sergeant, we just jumped in his car and we started driving down the road.
I've never seen so many calls on my computer before. This has got to be legitimate.
Patrol officers arrive and discover a scene of devastation.
There had been a mass shooting. There were multiple casualties, and one person was on the way to Harborview Medical Center.
The officers immediately call for backup.
These things don't happen in Mukilteo. They're not used to being subjected to this type of trauma.
The shooter flees the scene as investigators try to establish a motive behind the senseless and violent attack.
They all knew each other. They were all part of the same friend group.
These kids are innocent. They were good kids.
They soon learn that one of the victims, 19-year-old Anna Bowie, was being stalked by a jealous ex-boyfriend.
He wanted his girlfriend back, and it sounds like she didn't want him back.
He didn't think it was fair to him that she would move on with her life, even though he was the one that broke up with her. If I can't have her, then nobody can have her.
This is the tragic story of how a close group of friends fell victim to the anger and resentment of one green-eyed killer.
This was what his goal was, and he was going to follow through.
The city of Mukilteo in Snohomish County, Washington, is located 25 miles north of Seattle.
Mukilteo is a bedroom community for the most part. A lot of people who live here commute to places like Seattle. There's a Boeing plant just outside of the city.
6.5 square miles, one high school, very close-knit community. Everyone pretty much knows what goes on.
It's fairly safe. We have mostly property crimes for the most part. I mean, we do have our occasional personal crimes, but majority of it's property crimes.
On the evening of Friday, July 29th, 2016, police officers from Mukilteo Police Department begin their shift, patrolling the quiet streets of their city.
Started out as a normal shift. I logged in 6 o'clock. We were just out moving about the city, seeing what was going on.
For the most part, the day looks like responding to 911 calls and making traffic stops.
In another part of the city, a group of high school friends gather at a house for a party to celebrate the end of their first year in college. But as they are enjoying the night, little do they realize they are being observed and stalked by a dangerous young man who has recently purchased a semi-automatic rifle and 40 rounds of ammunition.
He had purchased the AR-15 prior to the party, so he must have known that there was a party going to take place or a gathering at a specific location.
Shortly after midnight, multiple 911 calls begin lighting up the switchboard of Mukilteo Police Department.
A lot of times you get calls about shots fired in the city, and they're either fireworks complaints or something like cars backfiring, so you usually get like one caller sometimes on those.
I was working the computer while my sergeant at the time, Colt Davis, was driving, and I was reading off the call list to him. I couldn't read the computer fast enough to read every single line.
Officer Dodds was reading the calls off the screen, the notes of the narrative, saying that a couple kids were hurt, and there's multiple callers coming about the situation, and that this probably shooter may have left the scene. And so we were all driving with the lights and sirens to the call.
The responding officers arrive at the scene of the gunfire, unsure of what they will find.
We pulled in our normal, safety spot where you pull in. I remember getting out and getting my rifle. At the time, I didn't know anything other than there's people that were shot, there's people that were down. In my head, I'm trying to think of what I should be doing and how we should approach it, just like the sergeant at the time was trying to pre-plan what we were gonna do.
So I walked out to the street a little bit to see if I can see anything, and the only thing I saw was just a baseball cap, like literally sitting in the middle of the street. And I was like, this is so weird, because you think, again, the amount of callers we had, something would be happening down here.
When we get there, nobody's there. And this is the time that officers around the country are being ambushed. And I was thinking, are we being set up? Is there something that I'm not seeing?
As I kind of circled out to the house, the garage door was open, but it started closing. And I was like, this is weird because like kids are asking for help. We're here on scene. The doors are open. Why are they shutting all of a sudden?
The officers need to find out what is going on inside the property they have been called to.
And then we started hearing yelling from a roof above us.
We started walking closer to the house that we saw kids start screaming at us from the top of this house. Like just like, hey, help us, and screaming at us and trying to get our attention.
We're now having communication with the people above us. They're yelling that their friends have been shot. And when we ask them questions, where? They couldn't give us answers to our questions.
They shout out instructions to the young people who have taken shelter on the roof to remain where they are.
So we fell back behind like this rock shrubbery area, and it was again me, Officer Dodds, and the trooper. I was like, hey guys, like, we gotta move forward because we know what's happening here, we gotta move forward. You guys get behind me, I'll be in front. We're gonna circle to the side of the garage and we'll circle around the house and see if we see anything.
We were gonna go up the driveway because it was kind of a steep driveway. We were gonna go around the house and check the backside of the house and see if we couldn't kind of figure out what was going on.
I remember getting to the back and saw my first window in the back of the house, and I saw kids like kind of moving around, but they're kind of crouched down in there. And I was like, this is weird, this is a weird call.
On that side of the house, they had an eave on the very top of the house, all windows covering, fire pit, just an area where people could gather. But there was broken glass from that ceiling area. And that's when me and the sergeant kind of looked at each other. We kind of knew, okay, that's not normal. And as we were approaching the front of the house on the first corner, we came across our first downed individual.
The young man lying face down on the lawn is 19-year-old Jacob Long. He has received multiple gunshot wounds and is unresponsive.
You turn him over and it's just not expecting to see someone like that. So that's when it was like, this is like a real situation that's going on. We made radio for notifications on the radio that, hey, we have at least one person down right now.
Now we have one that's not breathing, but we need to continue moving because we don't know now where the shooter's at. So we're trying to focus on what can we do to find more information.
And we walked closer to the front door. And as we reached the front door, the door was open. One kid was holding his friend who had been shot several times.
It was at that time that we found Jordan Ebner, obviously deceased, in the entryway.
19-year-old Jordan Ebner from nearby Lake Stevens was attending the party at his friend's house on the night of the attack.
Before I got promoted, I was a crime prevention officer. So I went to a lot of schools in Mukilteo. I went to lunches and hung out with kids and stuff. This guy noticed me. He's like, oh my God, Officer Davis, thank God you're here, because he recognized who I was. And he went to get up. And my police brain's like, don't move, right? Because I don't know what's happening. Like, don't move, I don't know what's going on, stay where you're at.
The police officers need to bring the situation under control without any further loss of life.
We knew that we had help coming, but we knew we couldn't wait for that help. The best thing that we could think of was we got to get these people off the roof to us. And then at that point, we can go in and search to see who's in the house.
I made the decision to leave Officer Dodds and the trooper at the front door until more units arrived. And I went back down the driveway, kind of coordinate a response to this situation.
We called each kid down one by one and brought them to us. Me and the trooper were at the top of the stairs, and Colt was down at the bottom of the driveway.
Officer Dodds and the trooper started calling people out of the house, and they would, hey, just go around the hill, you see an officer.
Each kid came down, 8 kids, 9 kids, one by one came to us. Sergeant Davis just took the first house that opened up a door. That's where we put the kids.
These people across the street were amazing. I commandeered their house. I was like, everyone's going inside your house. Didn't even think to even ask them, just kind of directed them to, and they just accepted everybody willingly.
They were together, but they were now safe. Now we had to game plan what our next step was, because we still didn't have anybody else to come help us. And we decided that we were gonna wait for additional units to arrive so we could make sure that if the shooter was still in the house, we were safe.
I called my chief, I called my assistant chief, I called our PIO, no one was answering the phone. I was like, I am just lost for space right now.
I got a phone call at home from then Sergeant Colt Davis, now Assistant Chief Colt Davis, and he quickly explained to me what had gone on.
He immediately was like, okay, Colt, don't worry about it. I'll call people in for you. I'm on my way to assist you. And I was like, I just felt better.
Backup now arrives from neighbouring law enforcement agencies to assist the Mukilteo Police Department in securing the scene.
We got some additional units there from surrounding agencies. The surrounding agencies had a bunch of guys on the SWAT team. The best move for us was to allow them to move through the house because they had the technical and the tactical training that we don't have. And we went in and we cleared the house. And when we hit the kitchen, we found Anna Bowie in the dining room area, deceased.
19-year-old Anna Bowie was a first-year student at the University of Washington, Bothell.
She lived in Everett with her parents and her older sister and her brother. They did not know that Anna was at this party because they weren't part of the same text groups.
With the scene now cleared and secure, investigators quickly try to identify the perpetrator of this horrific crime.
We cleared the house. We started searching the neighborhood for any vehicles.
We're trying to identify who knew him, and apparently they all were familiar with each other through high school.
These kids have come back home from like college. It was like summertime, so they were having a gathering at their house.
The survivors from the party are questioned by police, and the name of the chief suspect soon emerges.
I sent an officer or two inside the house for witnesses, like, hey guys, I need information. I need to know who did this. An officer from Mount Terrace says, okay, cool. Kids are telling me it's this kid, Ivanov.
19-year-old computer science student Alan Ivanov had previously attended Kamiak High School with many of the guests at the party that night.
Anna Bowie had just broken up with Alan Ivanov.
We put out the bolo with the belief that he was the shooter based on what the partygoers said and based on things that he had posted on social media.
The race is now on to apprehend Alan Ivanov before he can kill or injure anyone else. July 30th, 2016. A group of college friends enjoying themselves at a summer house party are attacked by a young man armed with a semi-automatic rifle. Within minutes of the first shots ringing out, 3 young people lose their lives in a shocking display of extreme violence and terror. 2 other partygoers are wounded as the shooter mercilessly hunts down his victims while moving through the house. Only when he has expended all of his ammunition does the killer flee the scene. Mukilteo Police Department respond to multiple 911 calls and rescue the remaining partygoers who have fled upstairs to the roof of the house. They quickly identify the attacker as their former high school classmate, 19-year-old computer student Alan Ivanov.
He was quite brilliant in computers and computer science, a little introverted, but I don't know that anybody foresaw that he would be a mass shooter.
Investigators need to apprehend Ivanov as quickly as possible to prevent any further loss of life.
I decided at that point to ask dispatch to do a trace on his phone and find out where he was going.
We're pinging phones, we're trying to identify where he may be located, and we're putting that information out, and we're tracking the movement on that ping to try to make sure that our law enforcement partners in the area can know how to respond and what to do.
He started heading south on I-5. He started calling family members. He called his aunt, he called his grandmother. In Chehalis, just south of Olympia, which is the state capital, roughly halfway between Seattle and Portland, Oregon, State Patrol found his car, which was a pretty specific white Subaru WRX. They pulled him over. The rifle was sitting on the seat right next to him.
Driver, step out of the car and face away. Do it now. 320. Put your hands up. With your left hand, reach down to your shirt and pull it up so I can see your waistline. Now turn in a circle. Keep going. Keep going. Now put your hands back up and start walking back toward my car. Keep coming.
He didn't resist. He just gave himself up. State Patrol took him into custody.
We were contacted by State Patrol that they had a suspect in custody, and the vehicle matched the description of what we had from the scene from the crime in Mukilteo.
They called a tow truck, and they escorted him and the car back up to Snohomish County, and we took custody.
Come back here so you're still being audio video recorded, okay? No one else in the car?
They did read him his Miranda rights at the scene. He waived his Miranda rights. And then there was Ivanov, and he was mumbling to himself in the back seat about how screwed he was.
God, please forgive me. God, please let me die.
Obviously, the harder part after that was like the victims, the witnesses, doing death notifications with people.
The survivors from the party are still in a deep state of shock as one by one, their families arrive to take them home.
We had a large crowd of people at the top of Chenal Beach Road. I had already been given information of who the three were that were deceased. And when I went up there, I'm making a list for who's there to pick up who. And I'll never forget when Jordan Ebner's dad walked up and said that he was there for his son. I stopped before I even wrote the name down because I already knew that his son was deceased. And I can't tell him that. I had to continue focusing on what my job was and keep taking names.
Among the families waiting for news of their loved ones is Jacob Long's mother, Autumn Snyder.
About 3 in the morning, I woke up and checked my phone, and I had a missed call, a voicemail from Christina, who at the time was Jake's girlfriend. She just kept saying that Jake was missing, that he had gone into the trees and nobody could find him, and to call her. And she had sent that shortly after midnight. And so I didn't know what to do, so I just called 911 and said, I think my son was in like a car accident. Have you received any phone calls? And said that she was gonna have me talk to a detective. And so I knew then that there was a problem.
Mukilteo Police Department open up a nearby church to use as a collection point for family members arriving at the scene.
We did have a site where we were letting the victims who had fled the scene meet up with their parents. And unfortunately, Jake Long's mom was there.
Walked into the church and just immediately surrounded by all of these women. And they had me sit down. The detective came up and she'd let me know that he had passed away and that he had been shot and that multiple kids were there and there were multiple fatalities.
Police soon learned that 19-year-old Anna Bowie was Alan Ivanov's ex-girlfriend.
We knew that Anna Bowie was the victim in the kitchen because the host of the party told us that she was obviously the target or the primary target of Ivanov.
Anna had been in a relationship with Alan Ivanov for nearly 2 years, but Ivanov had decided to break up with her earlier that summer. Police now learn about partygoer Will Kramer, who fled from the house after being shot and injured by Ivanov.
It was going by radio that there was a kid who actually got shot, but was running into the street and got picked up by another officer who took him to the ambulance and they got him out of there.
Will Kramer's dad came to the door and I let him know that his son had been shot. The officer that was with me had seen his son and was able to tell him he was talking. He was being transported, but he was alive. And I wanted to make sure to get him to the hospital. He'd asked me to go contact his mother, which I also did that as well.
Alan Ivanov is transported back to Mukilteo by Washington State Police and handed over to the Mukilteo Police Department.
I wrote a search warrant to process Mr. Ivanov's body to see if there was any victim blood, any other evidence on him. And so I took hair clippings, I took all of his clothes, and I photographed him both clothed and unclothed. He was given a Tyvek suit and put in a holding cell until I could finish what's called the probable cause statement. So, Alan, you want to know what happened tonight?
Want me to just start from the beginning?
Start from the beginning.
It was a long story. It was about a girl. And so what I did was I found a party that she was at. We recently broke up 2 months ago, but last week we started kind of talking again and seeing if there's any chance that we can get together. And it felt like she really wanted to, but what I saw at that party made me go back to my trunk and get that rifle without thinking.
John Ernst and I interviewed him for quite a while, did some processing of him, and then he was booked into jail by one of our patrol officers.
You hand him off to a booking officer. You take the probable cause statement to the desk at the jail. The booking officer then does the search and then gives him his jail clothes and a pair of flip-flops.
Investigators now begin building their case against Alan Ivanov, as the families of his victims are left to grieve for the senseless loss of their loved ones.
It was like 6 or 7 a.m. and we had to leave. The church needed to close. So the coroner came up to me and he handed me his business card and said, call me, later today about Jake's body. And I handed it back to him and I said, I don't need this because Jake's not dead. I know it was like delusional, but that's like very final.
Mukilteo, Snohomish County, Washington. Police are investigating the mass shooting at a house party that has left 3 young people dead and another young person badly injured. The partygoers had previously attended Kamiak High School and were celebrating the end of their first year in college. One of the victims, 19-year-old Anna Bowie, has been harassed and stalked by her ex-boyfriend, 19-year-old Alan Ivanov, in the days leading up to the attack.
Mr. Ivanov went to Kamiak High School, which is the big high school in our city, which is where he met Anna Bowie. Most, if not all, the partygoers were also Kamiak kids.
Ivanov is identified as the shooter by the survivors who managed to escape his murderous rampage by hiding on the balcony of the house. Mukilteo police request assistance from outside agencies to help with an investigation on this scale.
We started with the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office Major Crimes Unit when it was determined by our chief at the time and Nicole and me that we had more on our plate than we could possibly handle initially.
Ivanov is arrested a few hours after the attack by Washington State Police and brought back to Mukilteo, where he is questioned by local police.
Detective Stone and I sat down with him and did an in-custody interview, and we talked about his relationship with Anna. Some of the things he said struck me as classic domestic violence talk. Things like it wasn't fair that she should be able to go on with her life in spite of the fact that he was the one that broke up with her.
We dated for 1.5 years, and what happened was 2 months ago, without thinking, I just kind of broke up with her, and she went to Europe for like a month, and I went to New York with a friend.
Anna, prior to the murder, she had been in Europe for a month, traveling around and seeing things, living in youth hostels, and having the time of her life.
Interviews with Anna's closest friends reveal a darker side to her relationship with Ivanov.
He had threatened suicide multiple times during their relationship that she had to talk him out of. After they broke up, she blocked him on everything, but somehow he still saw some things that she would post on social media.
I started seeing her on Snapchat and seeing what she was doing, and saw her snaps with other guys on their beds. The things that I saw were pretty hurtful.
She was with Will Kramer one night, and she had posted, pictures on her Snapchat story and stuff. Nothing bad, they were just hanging out, but he didn't like that. And I think he had trust issues, and he was jealous of, her being away from him.
On Sunday, July 24th, 2016, 1 week before the fatal shootings, Alan Ivanov goes to a store and purchases a semi-automatic rifle and ammunition.
During the interview with Mr. Ivanov, he got into how easy it was for an 18-year-old to buy a rifle. He seemed to try to blame his behavior on how easy it was to buy a rifle.
In the days before the attack, Ivanov had reached out to Anna, hoping to rekindle their relationship.
She needed time to think, and that if they wanted to get back together, he needed to get rid of the gun and he needed to seek mental health help. And he stated that no amount of help would ever fix him. He posted it on several different forms of social media. He had just bought a gun recently, so I think that was why we were all kind of on edge about that. He was the type of person that needed to show that he had power, I guess. So I could see him buying a gun for that reason, just like he had bought the new car and stuff like that.
He tried to control her by being dramatic. There was a scene the day before the party where she had gone off with a friend, a female friend of hers, and he was jealous that she was spending time with somebody else, and so he called her and threatened to commit suicide.
In Ocean Shores on Thursday night, it had started out over text, but Alan was contemplating suicide. I wasn't really surprised, I guess, because it seemed to happen every time she was away. We called the suicide prevention hotline. Anna called Alan, and he was just sobbing on the phone, asking for her back.
I was pretty suicidal.
Okay.
But I knew I wasn't going to do anything. It was more just me to take some time, and that gun was just power.
During the course of their phone conversation, Anna tells Ivanov something he is not expecting to hear.
Anna had told Alan that she made out with another guy. She didn't say who, but when they were talking on the phone in Ocean Shores, he was really upset about that and he wanted to know who it was. But she didn't want to tell him because she was scared that he would hurt that person.
And then she had to go, so I hung up and I was just sitting there. I left 5 minutes later and I went home. She said she needed time, and I really understood that, but I just wanted to see what was going on in the meantime. I went to the party to just find out what was she doing and who was she hanging out with. And I know it's messed up, right? Stalking pretty much.
What was she doing that made you so upset?
She was just drinking and smoking with other guys.
With other guys?
Even when she told me she really wanted to be back with me.
He tried to say at first he didn't want to do it, actually going to think about backing out. And then when he saw what she was doing at the table, talking to these guys, that enraged him.
The whole event was a burst of emotions. I had went out and bought a rifle for the purpose of shooting at a range. What I saw at that party made me go back to my trunk and get that rifle without thinking. I parked my car across the street pretty far, but I kind of found where all the cars were, and I saw the house, and I was just sitting there for a while, and I was just kind of listening.
He goes there, he identifies people that he wanted to be there to commit this heinous crime.
He went to a patio door on the back side of the house, which was right off where the breakfast nook was, and in the breakfast nook, there was Anna and some other party goers. They were playing a drinking game, which drove Ivanov crazy.
She was with some guy already, feeding him and stuff. And that's when I got really mad and I couldn't think properly.
And then he went back out to his car. He had just purchased the rifle, didn't know how to use it. He hadn't taken it out of the box even. So he went through the owner's manual, figured out how to load a magazine, put the magazine in the rifle, and make it go.
I walked across the street with my rifle, went to that same spot where I was sitting in, and I was just listening in, and I could hear them in the garage, playing beer pong or something. Just listening to their conversations, and after that, I really didn't know what my intentions were. I kind of went through the forest to the back, hid behind there, and then I was near the front of the house. That's when the guy kind of unexpectedly walked in front of me, and I lost it. I was shocked.
Jake Long got up, walked toward Ivanov without knowing that Ivanov was there. He was at the outdoor fireplace. He saw Ivanov with the gun. He turned, and Ivanov shot him in the back 3 times.
He said, "Oh, no, I pulled the trigger." And after that I couldn't hear anything.
I thought your rifle was unsafe.
I flipped it to fire. Once he shot, there was no going back. And then some other guys by the patio thought it was fireworks or something, and I kind of ignored that, and that's it. And there was nothing else being said.
I was outside sitting by a fire with 3 other of my friends. All of a sudden, one of my friends, Jake Long, got up and walked over to the side of the house. I don't know what made him do that. I didn't even notice he did that until after I heard like 2 or 3 gunshots go off. I saw him hit the ground and yelled, but still, like, none of us had seen the shooter. It was really dark out at that point. We remained seated, but we were looking around because more, like, shots were going off. At this point, we weren't positive they were gunshots. At least I wasn't. But then, like, 1 gunshot later, I felt it on my shoulder, and I knew immediately that I had been hit. I just reacted and sprinted. I got up and jetted off of my chair and sprinted through his backyard and jumped over a pile of bushes. I didn't even feel the wound for quite a while. There, I called 911, and I didn't even look at my phone, or I thought he would see the light. So I just laid there, and I listened to my friends screaming as more gunshots went off.
When we heard it in the beginning, it was caught off guard, so we weren't looking for it. But then as we were paying more attention, I knew that the sound had come from above.
I started to hear people running and scrambling and stuff like that. My friend Alexis Gemmer came into the garage, and I opened the garage to try to run.
Tristan opened the garage door halfway, and he crawled under and ran to the end of the driveway and then looked back to look at me. Tristan's driveway, there's the road, and then it kind of goes up into a level area, and he was standing like right halfway in between like the rise. Like he was probably 5 feet up from the street.
And as I got to the bottom of the hill, I turned back to look at the house to see the shooter, the rifle, aiming at me.
I was crawling under, and then shots came from above us. I saw Tristan jump. He was like standing there, and then he started jumping, and then he looked up onto the deck, and then I ran in because I was scared.
As I saw that, I turned to run, got shot at, and then I tripped in the street and scrambled to get up, and I ran to my neighbor's house directly next to our house.
Was Alexis running with you out of the garage?
She stayed, and then when she saw that the neighbors opened their door, she came down and joined me.
What did you hear Tristan say about the shooter?
Just when he looked at me, he was just like, I think it was Alan, because they had talked about a couple days earlier, my friend had been threatened by him.
Alan Ivanov is charged with the murders of Jacob Long, Jordan Ebner, and Anna Bowie.
We charged Ivanov with aggravated first-degree murder. And in Washington state, there are only 2 penalties for aggravated first-degree murder: the death penalty and life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Investigators continue to build their case against Ivanov as the community of Mukilteo mourns the tragic deaths of 3 young people. Mukilteo, Washington, 2016. Investigators have arrested and charged 19-year-old Alan Ivanov with the murder of 3 young people at a house party in July of that year. Ivanov entered the property armed with a semi-automatic rifle and began randomly shooting at terrified partygoers, many of whom he knew from Kamiak High School. Under police interrogation, Ivanov claims that his motive was revenge against his ex-girlfriend, 19-year-old Anna Bowie. Anna was shot and killed while lying helplessly on the kitchen floor. The couple had been in a relationship for 2 years until Ivanov decided to end things at the beginning of that summer. He became enraged after his recent attempts to reconcile with Anna had been rejected just a few days before the attack.
This was probably the most critical event we've had in our city. I remember my squad trying to process the scene, trying to process the stuff that's going on.
At the high school, they wrote messages in the parking lot with sidewalk chalk, stuffed animals, candles, pictures, and it stayed there for quite some time.
I remember there was a candlelight visual. They had a big memorial at the Kamiak High School that I basically went to like every single night I worked. It kind of felt good to be there.
The families of the 3 young people killed are left to mourn their loved ones who were taken from them at such a young age.
Jordan Ebner was well-liked among his friend group. He was somebody that, according to the people we talked to, everybody could talk to. You know, if you're having a problem, Jordan was the guy that you called, right? He was well-loved. He was an older brother, and his brother looked up to him as kind of an idol or a hero. His loss was tragic, I think, for obviously his family, but also the community. Jake Long was a baseball prodigy. He became the starting catcher as a sophomore on a senior-laden team at Kamiak High School, which was a very good baseball team, and he became a leader on that team. And that was kind of his life. But he was another one who was well-loved and a leader among his friend group. His mom was completely shattered with his death.
He got to make such strong, close relationships, which he had with the kids that night. I think Jacob always wanted to have siblings, and that wasn't something that we were planning to do. Loved spending time with them. Lots of pictures of him holding the kids. Madison was 4 when he passed away, so her memories are very few, which I know is hard for her. But he was really close with William, my older son, who was 6 when he passed away.
Anna Bowie was somebody who was, from all accounts, universally loved. Everybody loved her. Everybody thought she was great. She was everybody's friend. She was vivacious and outgoing. She was a lover of music and a singer.
Investigators search Ivanov's phone and laptop for any evidence of premeditation before his shooting spree on the night of the party. Recent internet searches by Ivanov reveal a fascination with firearms and other recent mass shooting events.
He was Googling body counts of mass killers. He was Googling mass killer names. He was Googling how to do a mass killing, mass killings at a party. He'd found a song that was consistent with those Google searches. He was searching clothing that would assist him in hiding his identity and escaping from the scene. There was no doubt that he was planning to do this, and there was no doubt that he was planning to get away with it.
Further searches of Ivanov's cell phone reveal a troubling series of text conversations with a friend in the days leading up to the attack.
The friend was trying to talk him out of it, just right up until the shooting. And I just remember one of the things he said to the friend is, you need to stay in your own lane.
Teens and young people, they say things and they act out and they do things, especially when they feel hurt and pain from a breakup or something like that. But I don't think anyone took it relatively seriously.
More disturbing evidence of Ivanov's lack of remorse emerges from an intercepted letter he tried to send from his prison cell to a former cellmate.
While Ivanov was in jail, he wrote some rap lyrics that he sent, which then got found out by the prison staff there. And it was just basically bragging about what he had done.
DOC searches all inmate mail. And so they intercepted this letter where he admitted to the murder and celebrated it. One of the rap lyrics that I thought was very telling was, AR-15, not a Dragunov, slide up at your party, call me Alan Ivanov. This was months after the shooting, and there was not the least little bit of remorse. And that was one of the reasons I thought that we might get to the death penalty in this case.
Prosecutors weigh up the mitigating factors in the case, including Ivanov's young age and lack of any previous criminal record. But his lack of remorse for the killings and his refusal to accept blame for his actions go against him.
Our elected prosecutor at the time would always bring in his senior prosecutors. He gave Detective Stone and I an opportunity to speak as to what we thought should happen to him. And then each of the prosecutors would get a say as to whether or not they thought that he should seek the death penalty.
I was very much opposed to life in prison without parole. I wanted him to have the death sentence. He gave that to my child. He gave that to 3 children. And he made devastating impacts on the lives of the other children that were there that night.
There were aggravating factors in favor of the death penalty, the pre-planning, the number of victims, the fact that he had no remorse, but there were also mitigating factors, his age and his lack of criminal history.
Ivanov is scheduled to attend Everett District Court on Monday, December 19th, 2016.
The Friday before that, December 16th, my phone blew up with text messages and phone calls from the two prosecutors on this case, Adam Cornell and Lisa Paul. And so I called Adam, and he told me that Ivanov was going to enter a guilty plea to aggravated first-degree murder ×3.
When the prosecutor came to me and said, "We've decided to accept a plea deal," I was very angry. It was really explained to me that this is better because it gives closure.
Alan Ivanov pleads guilty to 3 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder.
Mr. Ivanov did plead guilty to all of the charges on December 19th. And then in January, we reconvened at the courtroom, and all of the parents were there. And it was a very emotional time. Anna Bowie's father, speaking through a translator, broke down in tears. And Jake Long's mom brought Jake's ashes.
I brought Jacob's ashes with me because I wanted Alan to see Jacob. I think closure is important. I think for me, giving that impact statement was very, very important.
Ivanov addresses the families of his victims in the courtroom.
He got a chance to speak and said that Satan was in charge. Again, passing off the blame for his behavior to somebody or something else and not taking responsibility for what it was that he did.
I believe the sense of rejection fed into this sense of entitlement that, how dare you not want me? If you're not going to be with me, you're not going to be with anyone, which is that young, immature love that you think that you fall into a relationship and that person you're with is your possession, and it's not the case.
He could have gone on to do good things for society, but chose to go the wrong way. Being that young and spending that many years in prison is also, I think, very well-serving.
With Ivanov now behind bars for the rest of his life, the community of Mukilteo tries to move on while commemorating the young lives lost on that tragic night in July 2016.
It was very interesting to see the community come together, but it was a wake-up call to our community as well that we're not immune to things that you see in the news.
We have a park now that's been dedicated to victims. A lot of people in the community knew these kids. It's been several years, but I think there's still an impact there.
These kids were with friends, all of them good kids that we've never dealt with, that we had no idea who they were. That someone walks into a party where they're all having fun and murders 3 of them in cold blood. That will be with me forever.
you.